Speaker Mike Johnson is now responding to President Trump's call for Republicans to end the filibuster in order to end the shutdown. The move would allow Senate Republicans to pass a bill to fund the government with a simple majority. But Senate Majority Leader John Thune says that could come back to bite Republicans when Democrats have a majority.
Not my issue, not something I get to even weigh in on. My opinion on this is not relevant. It's the senators. But I think that it just is another expression of the frustration, of the pressure that is being felt, the anger by the president and by me and all of us that we're in this situation at all.
Meanwhile, in less than 24 hours, more than 40 million Americans will lose critical food assistance. ABC News Washington, D.C. Bureau Managing Editor Catherine Falders is here with the latest. Hi, Catherine. So any word from Republican lawmakers on whether they're seriously considering this call to end the filibuster?
Okay, so here's what nobody is talking about right now. Trump's attorney general just had the worst day of her entire career. And honestly, it might be the worst performance we've ever seen from a sitting AG in modern history. I'm not even exaggerating here. Pam Bondi walked into that Senate hearing thinking she was going to defend the Justice Department, and instead she got absolutely demolished by Democrats who weren't holding anything back. And look, before you think this is just another boring hearing where politicians yell at each other for a few hours, this was different. This was personal. This was ugly. And yeah, it got so heated that the whole thing basically imploded on live television. We're talking shouting matches. We're talking senators calling out cover-ups. We're talking about Bondi literally refusing to answer basic questions about whether she's turned the DOJ into Trump's personal revenge machine. But before we go any further, real quick, let's be honest. You can't really trust mainstream media anymore. That's why we built Pump Politics, to bring you real stories, real context, and no corporate spin. If you want to stay ahead of the headlines, join our free newsletter. We'll send the news straight to your inbox every day. Just click the link in the description to join. And if you just want to support what we're doing, join us, be part of the community that actually cares about the truth. All right, let's get back to the video.
Well, you just heard there from House Speaker Mike Johnson saying it's not his call, but we are hearing from at least a spokesperson for John Thune, of course, on the Senate side. Now, keep in mind, remember a couple weeks ago, John Thune was asked about this, and he said it wouldn't be the right call. And his spokesperson has just told us, ABC News in a statement, that Leader Thune's position on the importance of the legislative filibuster is unchanged.
Meanwhile, Democrats say Republicans are refusing to use contingency funds to keep SNAP benefits going. But Speaker Johnson says there's no legal mechanism to do that. What's the latest on that front?
Can you believe this? The person who's supposed to be the top law enforcement officer in the entire country just sat there and dodged questions like she was some kind of suspect in an interrogation room. And the craziest part is that nearly 300 former Justice Department employees, people who actually worked there for decades, they all signed a letter basically saying Bondi and Trump are destroying everything the DOJ is supposed to stand for. 300 people. Think about that for a second. These aren't random critics or political opponents. These are career prosecutors, investigators, lawyers who dedicated their lives to justice. And they're all saying the same thing, which is that what's happening right now is dangerous and unprecedented. So here's what went down. Bondi shows up to the Senate Judiciary Committee hearing, and right from the start, Democrats came at her with everything they had. They wanted answers about why Trump critics are suddenly getting indicted. They wanted to know why former FBI Director James Comey is facing charges. They wanted to know if the Justice Department is being used as a political weapon to go after anyone who dares to stand up to Donald Trump. In Bondi's response, she basically said, "Trust me, everything's fine. We're just going back to fighting real crime." Yeah, right. Because indicting the former FBI director is definitely what we should be prioritizing when there's actual criminals out there committing actual crimes. But here's where it gets really wild. Senator Dick Durbin, who's been around forever and has seen some crazy stuff in his time, he looks at Bondi and says something that honestly gave me chills. He said, "In just 8 months, you have drastically altered the Justice Department and left a significant mark on American history. It will take decades to mend. Decades." Let that sink in. We're not talking about a few policy changes that the next administration can reverse. We're talking about fundamental damage to one of the most important institutions in our entire democracy. The Justice Department is supposed to be independent. It's supposed to operate without political interference. That's literally the whole point. But under Bondi and Trump, it's become something completely different. And look, I know some people are going to say, well, every administration uses the DOJ for political purposes. That's just how it works. But come on, this is not normal. This is not business as usual. When you have 300 former DOJ employees sounding the alarm, when you have senators from both parties looking genuinely concerned about what's happening, when you have the Attorney General herself refusing to answer direct questions about politicization, Yeah, that's a problem. The hearing was supposed to be Bondi's chance to defend herself and restore some confidence in the Justice Department. Instead, it turned into this chaotic mess where she kept deflecting and attacking Democrats and basically doing everything except actually answering the questions she was asked. At one point, she said, "Under my leadership, the department is returning to its fundamental mission of combating real crime." And honestly, that would be a great line if it wasn't so obviously contradicted by everything the DOJ is actually doing right now. Because here's the thing, if you're really focused on combating real crime, why are you spending so much time and resources going after Trump's political enemies? Why is James Comey, who hasn't been in government for years, suddenly facing an indictment? Why are state officials who investigated Trump now finding themselves under federal scrutiny? This isn't about justice. This is about revenge. This is about using the full power of the federal government to settle scores and intimidate anyone who might challenge Trump. And the fact that Bondi can't or won't admit that is exactly why this hearing imploded the way it did. So yeah, buckle up, because we're about to break down everything that happened in this absolute train wreck of a Senate hearing. And trust me, it gets even worse from here. Alright, so let's get into the details of what actually went down, because honestly, the whole thing was just bizarre from start to finish. The Senate Judiciary Committee called Bondi in to testify about the state of the Justice Department and specifically about concerns that it's being weaponized for political purposes. And like this isn't some conspiracy theory, this is a legitimate concern based on actual actions the DOJ has taken since Trump came back into office. So Bondi walks in, and right away Democrats start hammering her with questions. They want to know about the indictment of James Comey. They want to know about investigations into state officials. They want to know about personnel changes at the DOJ, where career prosecutors are being pushed out and replaced with Trump loyalists. And Bondi's strategy for dealing with all this, basically just attack the questioners and refuse to engage with the substance. She kept saying things like the department is ending the weaponization of justice, which is such a wild statement because what does that even mean? The DOJ under Biden wasn't perfect, but it wasn't going after Republican politicians just for being Republican. Meanwhile, under Bondi, we're seeing investigations and indictments that just happen to target people who criticized Trump or investigated him in the past. That's not ending weaponization. That's literally weaponization. And the Democrats weren't having it. They came prepared with receipts. They brought up specific cases, specific decisions, specific firings. They asked about why certain investigations were dropped and why others were suddenly prioritized. And Bondi just kept stonewalling. She'd say things like, "I can't comment on ongoing investigations," or "that's not an accurate characterization," or "my job is to follow the law, not play politics." Can you believe this? The irony is just off the charts. She's sitting there claiming she doesn't play politics, while literally everyone can see that her entire tenure as Attorney General has been about serving Trump's political interests. It's like watching someone stand in the rain and insist they're not getting wet. But here's where things really started to break down. The hearing got personal. Democrats started pointing out Bondi's past, her relationship with Trump, the fact that she's been loyal to him for years. They questioned whether she has the independence to actually run the Justice Department fairly. And Bondi did not take that well. She started firing back with her own accusations. She said Democrats were the ones who weaponized justice during the Trump investigations. She brought up the Russia probe and the impeachments and basically tried to turn the whole thing into a both sides situation. And look, yeah, there's always going to be political considerations in how justice gets applied. But there's a difference between having political considerations and turning the entire Justice Department into an opposition research firm for the president. The hearing also touched on something that's not getting enough attention, which is what's happening in Democratic-led cities. Under Bondi, the DOJ has been deploying federal resources into cities run by Democrats, supposedly to fight crime. But the way it's being done, the messaging around it, the specific targeting of certain cities, it all feels less like law enforcement and more like political intimidation. And this gets to a bigger question about federalism and the balance of power. Like states are supposed to have authority over their own law enforcement. The federal government is supposed to step in only when there's a compelling reason. But what we're seeing now is the DOJ using federal power to override state and local decisions, to push Trump's agenda, to make Democratic mayors and governors look bad. That's not how this is supposed to work. That's not what the Justice Department is for. But when Bondi was asked about this, she just brushed it off. She said we're helping communities that need it. She said we're making America safer. She completely ignored the political dimension of what's happening. And then there's the James Comey situation, which honestly deserves its own deep dive. Comey was the FBI director who Trump fired back in his first term. He's been a vocal critic of Trump ever since. And now suddenly, years later, he's facing federal charges. The timing is suspicious to say the least. The charges themselves seem questionable, and when Democrats asked Bondi about it, she refused to provide any real explanation. She kept saying the decision was made by career prosecutors, that it was based on the evidence, that she trusts the process. But come on, nobody believes that. This is clearly a politically motivated prosecution. It's clearly designed to send a message to anyone who might criticize Trump, and Bondi's refusal to acknowledge that just makes it more obvious. The hearing also revealed some really troubling stuff about personnel changes at the DOJ. Under Bondi, there's been a massive turnover. Career prosecutors with decades of experience are being pushed out. They're being replaced with people who have obvious political connections to Trump. This isn't normal. Every administration makes some changes, but what we're seeing now is different. It's a purge. And those 300 former DOJ employees who signed that letter, they specifically mentioned this. They said Bondi and Trump are taking a sledgehammer to long-standing norms. They said the institutional values that make the Justice Department credible are being destroyed. These are people who served under Republicans and Democrats. They're not partisan hacks. They're professionals who are genuinely alarmed by what they're seeing. But when Democrats brought up that letter, Bondi just dismissed it. She said those people don't work there anymore, so their opinions don't matter, which is such a revealing response because like these are people who dedicated their careers to the DOJ. They understand how it's supposed to function. If anything, their outside perspective makes their criticism more credible, not less. The other thing that came up in the hearing was the question of what happens next. If the Justice Department really has been compromised, if it really is being used as a political tool, what does that mean for future elections? What does that mean for investigations into Trump allies? What does that mean for the rule of law in general? And these aren't hypothetical questions. We're heading into election season. Trump is obviously going to use every tool at his disposal to maintain power and help his allies. If the Justice Department is one of those tools, that's a huge problem. It means investigations could be opened or closed based on political convenience. It means indictments could be used to damage opponents. It means the entire justice system becomes just another part of the political apparatus. Democrats were trying to get Bondi to acknowledge this risk. They were trying to get her to commit to some kind of independence, some kind of standard that would limit political interference. And she wouldn't do it. She just kept insisting that everything is fine, that the DOJ is operating properly, that concerns about weaponization are overblown. But here's the thing. When you're the Attorney General and you can't convincingly defend the integrity of your own department, that's a credibility problem. When senators are openly accusing you of corruption and you can't provide clear answers, that's a credibility problem. When hundreds of former employees are raising alarms and you just dismiss them, that's a credibility problem. And all of this played out on live television. People were watching this hearing. They saw Bondi dodge questions. They saw her get defensive and combative. They saw the breakdown in trust between her and Congress. And yeah, that matters, because the Justice Department only works if people believe it's legitimate, if people think it's just a political weapon, if they think justice is being applied selectively based on who you support, then the whole system falls apart. So that's where we are right now. We have an Attorney General who can't defend her own actions, a Justice Department that's being reshaped to serve one man's interests, and a political system that's increasingly unable to provide any checks or accountability. And the hearing that was supposed to address these concerns just made everything worse. Okay. So let's break down what this all actually means. Because honestly, this is bigger than just one bad hearing. This is about the future of justice in America. This is about whether we can trust the government to apply the law fairly, or whether we've entered a new era where whoever controls the White House controls the courts. First point, and this is crucial, what we're seeing with Bondi and the DOJ is not normal. Every administration has some level of political influence over the Justice Department. That's unavoidable. But there are supposed to be limits. There are supposed to be norms. The Attorney General is supposed to have some independence. Career prosecutors are supposed to be able to do their jobs without fear of being fired for political reasons. All of that is breaking down right now. Under Trump and Bondi, the Justice Department has become more politicized than at any point in modern history. And yeah, I know some people will say, well, what about the prosecutions of Trump during Biden's term? Fair question. But here's the difference. Those prosecutions were based on actual evidence of actual crimes. They went through normal legal processes. They weren't targeting Trump just because he was a political opponent. What we're seeing now is different. It's prosecutions that seem designed to intimidate and punish. It's investigations that coincidentally target Trump critics. It's a systematic effort to reshape the DOJ into a tool for maintaining power. And the fact that Bondi can't or won't acknowledge this is exactly why that Senate hearing was such a disaster. Second point, the personnel changes at the DOJ matter more than people realize. When you push out career prosecutors and replace them with political loyalists, you're not just changing who shows up to work every day. You're changing the entire culture of the institution. You're sending a message that loyalty matters more than competence. You're creating an environment where people are afraid to make decisions that might displease the president. And this has long-term consequences. Even after Trump leaves office, even after Bondi is gone, the DOJ will still be dealing with the fallout. Trust has been broken, norms have been violated, and rebuilding all of that will take years, if not decades. That's what Senator Durbin was talking about when he said it will take decades to mend. This isn't damage that gets fixed quickly. Third point, what's happening with the DOJ is part of a broader pattern. Trump has always had an authoritarian streak. He's always wanted to use government power to punish enemies and reward friends. In his first term, there were at least some guardrails. There were people around him who would push back. There were norms that limited what he could do. But in this second term, those guardrails are gone. Trump knows how the system works now. He's installed loyalists in key positions, and he's moving much more aggressively to consolidate power. The DOJ is just one piece of this. We're also seeing it with regulatory agencies, with military leadership, with the courts. It's a comprehensive effort to reshape the entire federal government around Trump's personal interests. And look, I know this sounds alarmist. I know people are tired of hearing that democracy is under threat. But like when you have the Attorney General refusing to defend the independence of her own department, when you have hundreds of former DOJ employees warning about institutional collapse, when you have senators from both parties expressing concern about weaponization, yeah, that's a real problem. The fourth point is about what comes next. We're heading into a period where Trump is going to be using every tool he has to maintain power and help his political allies. The Justice Department will be part of that. We're going to see investigations into opponents. We're going to see prosecutions that seem politically motivated. We're going to see the law being applied differently depending on whether you're with Trump or against him. And the precedent this sets is dangerous. If Trump can get away with turning the DOJ into a political weapon, what's to stop the next president from doing the same thing? What's to stop Democrats from using the same playbook when they're back in power? We could be entering a cycle where every administration uses justice as a tool for political revenge. And once that starts, it's really hard to stop. The other thing to think about is the impact on public trust. The justice system only works if people believe it's fair. If people think you only get prosecuted because of your politics, if they think justice depends on who's in power, then why would they respect the law? Why would they cooperate with investigations? Why would they serve on juries? This is how institutions die, not through some dramatic collapse, but through slow erosion of credibility. And what we saw in that Senate hearing was another step in that erosion. Bondi couldn't defend the integrity of the DOJ because honestly, there isn't much integrity left to defend. So where does this leave us? We have a Justice Department that's being compromised. We have an Attorney General who's more interested in serving Trump than serving justice. We have a political system that's increasingly unable to provide oversight or accountability. And we have a public that's losing faith in the rule of law. The Senate hearing was supposed to be a chance to address these concerns. Instead, it just confirmed them. Bondi showed up, refused to answer questions, attacked her critics, and made it clear that the DOJ is going to keep doing exactly what it's been doing. And yeah, that should scare you. Because here's the thing. Once you lose the rule of law, once you lose the idea that everyone is accountable to the same standards, it's really hard to get that back. We're watching in real time as one of the most important institutions in American democracy gets hollowed out and turned into a political weapon. And the people who are supposed to be protecting it are either complicit or powerless to stop it. That Senate hearing was a preview of what's coming. More partisan warfare, more erosion of norms, more damage to institutions that we all depend on. And the fact that Bondi walked out of there thinking she did a good job, the fact that Trump supporters are celebrating her performance, that tells you everything you need to know about how disconnected from reality this whole thing has become. So yeah, this is where we are. The Attorney General got destroyed in a Senate hearing, and instead of taking it as a wake-up call, instead of recognizing that something is seriously wrong, the response is just to double down, to attack critics, to claim everything is fine, to keep pushing forward with the same agenda that's destroying the Justice Department from the inside. And the rest of us just have to watch it happen. We can sound the alarm, we can point out the problems, we can demand accountability, but at the end of the day, Trump has the power, and he's going to use it however he wants. The question is, whether there's anything left of our institutions by the time he's done, based on what we saw in that hearing. The answer isn't looking good. This is only going to get worse before it gets better. Stay tuned, because trust me, we're just getting started with the chaos.